everybody. This is a study session before our board meeting. It's a little after 6. Mr. Yeager will not be with us tonight, so we can proceed. Study sessions on the topic of the hiring process, the using the committee. The process we're using, as we've been given over the years, two memos from our attorneys saying that they're perfectly legal, so there's no problem with legality that I can see, and it's a process that has been used throughout the township for the bulk of their hiring, so it seems to work. So with that introduction, I'll open it up to anyone that wants to speak on the matter. I'm good with the way it is. Uda?
I have a question because this has come up a number of times. And Joe, I don't want to put you on the spot per se, but I know we got an opinion in a closed session from our attorney, but I've heard a lot of other people say they have other attorneys' opinions to the contrary, but I haven't seen any of those, and those have not been shared, right, Joe? And
Correct.
I had asked if you had written copies.
Correct,
or what.
no.
And I think that if we're going to call our own attorney's interpretation in question, that we should then have access to the materials that are contrary to that. I think what was laid out to us made a lot of sense, and I personally think our process makes a lot of sense. People always compare us to business and to run the township like a business, but businesses don't do this either. They don't have, open public hearings about, the 600 candidates for a job opening. We don't have ever 600 candidates, but I think that having our township manager, the appropriate other township managers, so department managers, for instance, if it's a police position, if not being the chief, of course, but having the chief on the committee, or having a staff member from that department on the committee, having a chairperson or a commissioner from that department on the committee, sorting through the large numbers of resumes that you might get. For lack of a better word, sorting the wheat from the chaff, right? You're going to get a number of resumes that you will automatically dismiss for a number of reasons. Everybody has their criteria, but for instance, one of mine as a manager is if you can't spell certain words properly in your resume, that's one of those things that starts to raise the bar, right? So I like the fact that we have that process in place, that then goes to our commissions for a review and comes to the board. I just don't see a lot of that happening in the public until you get to the final stages where you have maybe 3 or 4 serious candidates that you then want everybody to have access to. So that's where I'm just going to throw it out there and step back from my microphone.
Just a real quick point of clarification. I do believe probably about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, we did receive some correspondence from a different attorney, I believe from the Groseal Civic Association, an attorney that was representing them, that did provide some words of caution as it related to the Open Meetings Act and the delegation of a decision-making responsibility and, the concern about violating the Open Meetings Act. So just a point of clarification.
Well, and all that was an informal letter. It was not an opinion. It was not, and it happened to be an attorney.
Well, it was an opinion, but.
No, it was a letter.
It's a.
It was a
it's
letter.
It's his opinion.
It was a letter, though, Joe. There's a difference between a letter.
What
and
is the
an
difference
opinion.
between an opinion and the letter giving an
official
opinion?
Opinion is something that is asked for.
Okay, official, you didn't ask for it. I get it.
Yeah.
Let me just get going here because I have
Sure,
some
go ahead.
answers. For
Go
Uta.
ahead.
Uta, you're correct. It's not the group that was the issue. The Attorney General has an opinion on what an advisory group is and then what a group is that is based around the Township Board. My point was this, and the MTA. Now, I know you guys want something in writing from the MTA, and this will be that action item, because I can't talk about the opinion here tonight because it was in a closed session. So I obviously can't talk about that, and that's why I want to make that private document a public document, so I can then give it to the MTA. But I got two opinions from the MTA, and the one is an opinion. It's a verbal opinion, but the one from Mr. Cusimano is absolutely an opinion. And I'm not saying he's correct or ours isn't correct, but I just have a problem with the issue of if we are doing something wrong, and I know our attorney in the previous one, which whatever, says it's not a problem to have an interview in a closed session, even though you're knocking people out. It's clear that I read, and I'm not an attorney, but I'm pretty good at it being the police chief and being in my research and talking to the MTA attorneys, that if you knock people down and you have an interview, it must be in a public forum. Can't be in private because you're doing what the board would do, and I get it, it's in the policy, it's 30, I'm sorry, I had it written down here, 35 something, but, and I missed that. I was with Derek in his office. We went through the whole policy and procedure handbook. This was a year or so ago. And so I did miss that. But, you know, we can't dismiss the fact that we've had some problems. And Uta, you were very polite when you said you thought it was kind of messy. That was, you know, you were being nice and you were polite. And I agree with you. I think it was a little more than that in both of them. The problem that I have is, what is the best interest of Groseal Township? Do I think our opinion is incorrect by our, this is a bold statement too, by our township attorney? From what I've read and what I see and what I got from the MTA, I believe they're the real experts. They deal with it every single day, and I explained it to them perfectly, and they explained it back to me, the difference between an advisory group, which the subcommittee was said to be, and something from the board that knocks people out absolutely has to be in. As a matter of fact, they had the same case law they used as Mr. Cusimano did in the case. And it was, I believe, Booth versus University of Michigan. I almost said Michigan State, but sorry. It was University of Michigan. But nonetheless, first I have to get that opinion, Uta, in my hand, and then I want to get an opinion on that opinion, if you know what I'm trying to say. And they'll give me one. But I have to have it in my hand because I'm not going to go against the rules. I can't just give them. You know, we have it, but I'm not going to give it to them. So what's in the best interest of Groseal was what we looked at. What's in the best interest of the township? Now, November 14th, we okayed these policies and procedures, but we used it before the 14th. And I'm going to tell you what, it was more than a mess with the police one. We know that. It didn't go smooth with the fire one. But whatever happened when we used to go, and just like the police, there's the reason there's an ordinance. The police department used the ordinance. The commission did the interviewing. And why would it not be in the commission's hand to do the interviewing, go through the, and again, it's not going through the applications, Uta. It's the interviewing in a private setting. You can go through the applications if you like. He's the
Joe,
personnel.
I admit, I see the difference
Yeah,
that you.
he's the, hold,
I-
let me finish my
Well,
thought
I just
here,
wanted
'cause
to
we
let you
won't come
know,
back.
I just wanted to let you know, I do get that distinction between the committee sifting through the original resumes
Yep.
and then going into the interview
Yeah,
process.
that's a difference.
So I did want to state that.
Okay, but hold on. Let me finish this because I never seem to be able to get back when we get into a round robin. I get it. I'm at fault too. I do the same thing. So I believe the best interest of Groseal is Derek being on. Unfortunately, I mean, that's your job. I mean, we got a kid. He should be on every interview issue with the commission. And then from there, any expert from the township. Now, I know I'm not going to get into this, and I know, Jim, we had some differences of maybe why an expert shouldn't be there, or it was a conflict of interest at one time, but it was much of a conflict not putting the expert on that as it was putting it on the other side. So I just believe,
Expert, what do you mean?
Yeah,
let's say,
I'm lost.
well, we couldn't be, the fire, I don't want to get into the police issue because we got an issue now. So I'd rather not get into that. But there was an issue with, you can't because you're a conflict of interest. Nobody knew that whole group better and know what questions to ask better than I. But it couldn't be because it maybe wasn't who I recommended and did my job as a mentor. I was supposed to mentor an individual. I was supposed to bring somebody up. I was supposed to say who was head and shoulders above everybody if we had one. And that's all there is to it. But my point right now is I think the best in the policy should be the commission would review everything. If they want to sift through them, they can sift through them. But if you're going to have what could be better than the commission, Derek on everyone, Derek's got to be there. He's the personnel director. And any expert within the township. Uta, if we were hiring, let me give it straight to you. If we were hiring a deputy clerk or a helper in a clerk's office, Joe Porcerelli does not belong on that board. I know, no offense, I know more about a clerk than I do brain surgery. So I shouldn't be there. We know that. But you should have Brian Friel there, and you should be there too.
Well, but the reason we don't include the board members is because we have the final vote. And so I think that's where we're running against the wall.
But that's the balance. The
right?
problem here is you think that's a problem. I've been on 4 different interview committees, or I actually applied for 2 jobs. One was a deputy chief, one was a chief. Everyone had the mayor. Everyone had maybe trustees or councilmen. Everyone had, now I remember Brownstown, and I don't know if Brownstown has more than a couple of public safety commissioners, but they were there. So I don't know if there's only 2, but I don't know if that's all they have. So what I'm telling you, Groziel thinks we can't have, if we have an expert like you on that issue should be there. I don't care if you vote on it later. We need you to sift things out and ask the right questions. If they don't ask the right questions, how can you vote at the end? How could you really get a good educational vote in the end if Joe Porcerelli thinks, oh, I like this guy or I like that guy, but Joe Porcerelli, I don't know a thing about clerking. I really don't. So I shouldn't be anywhere near there. So that is my point about an expert. We always have I shouldn't say always, we possibly have somebody that's an expert in that field that should be there on the board or on the committee along with, and Derek, you should be on every single one. You're the personnel director. And if there's anybody and he's on the township board, Dave, if we were hiring somebody in your background is pensions and things like that. Let's say, for the money, the aspect, one of the girls behind the counter there, and I don't mean just taking the money, I mean, the deputy treasurer or whatever, position. Dave should be there because that's how to sift out from the beginning the correct individual. When it comes to Dave, there might only be a couple left that they said, let's just say this committee, and no offense to who's on that committee, this is not about the people, it's about the process. That's my point. So I just think my proposal is, and I can go into this, and I can go into all kinds of things. There's one area we're not going to touch right now, obviously. There's another area I'm not going to touch because it's over. So we need, I think, as a group to decide, is this the best process that we're having? I would like to see the commissions. They are the backbone of the township. They are the backbones of all the township. Handle the interview process with Derek and anybody that you guys feel or we feel as the board is an expert within the township or want to put on that committee. You could go out and there could be like somebody in Groziel that, I don't know, maybe they're an absolute expert in the clerk department. I don't know. Let's just say let's say they teach it. Let's say they're a professor. Let's say they're whatever. We could get anyone we want as long as the board feels that that's correct. But I think that is a much better process than this process. No offense to who you pick, but the personnel director gets to pick it. We're the board. We see it last, and you can have board members on that because everybody else does it, and it works out really good. I don't know why we don't. That's all. I'm just saying that. And it's, again, this isn't personal of who's there. It's the process I'm talking about.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and I guess I'll take that minute to say I understand what you're saying. I do. But I do just want to take a point of clarification too. in terms of deputies. So a lot of people don't know this, but a deputy is essentially a nominal role and an appointment of the officer. So the treasurer and the clerk can appoint a deputy. It can be anybody as long as they're a resident of Wayne County. What the township has, essentially what Mr. Friel and Ms. Darzniak and our deputy clerk, they have a separate kind of a role. And so officially, Mr. Friel, what he gets paid to do is he's the office manager of the clerk's office. He's clerk's office manager. Deputy clerk doesn't have any compensation tied to it. His second title is communications director, which is not even part of the clerk's office. It's a separate item. Ann Darznick is finance director, so deputy clerk is really a nominal title that she gets.
Deputy treasurer.
Deputy treasurer,
And
I'm
that's
sorry.
Sue Hennessy's the deputy
So,
treasurer.
yes,
Nice.
and so, and Ann was deputy clerk once, 100 years ago. So, what I want to say to close that up is, going back to our policies and procedures, we as a board can refine that to suit exactly the process that we want to see happen, and to bring on the individuals, make a rubric, say, don't say specific people, but say roles or whatever, that we have the opportunity, and I think that's why we're talking tonight, to address the issues you were, and to make it a process that we think will work better for Grosse Ile. I have to tell you, with the most recent process, maybe it might have worked better, flipped over, because again, when the final interview took place, that did make a big difference to a lot of people. So I just know it's within our power as the board to set the policy and the process that we want to follow. It's each of ours job to bring up the concerns that we have with the process, and then we will hammer out as a group how we want to, if we want to change the policy or not, and how we want to change the policy. And I think you made some valid points. As a board member, I would feel somewhat conflicted voting on hiring a deputy clerk and on the other, or a clerk's office manager. But at the same time, I would want to have a say in that, because I would
Say
know.
that again. I apologize. Please
No,
repeat.
but I would know the
first
questions to ask, right?
Okay,
That-
yeah, did you, okay, I thought you said you wouldn't want to be on that. I apologize. I miss.
No, I guess it's for me, it's a conflicting situation. As a board member, I would feel like maybe, because I'm in the final seat, I would feel like I don't want to steer the process, right?
But if you
And-
could help the process, Ute, with your education, your knowledge,
but it's
and
a
get that
fine line.
person to the end here,
Yeah.
what would be better than you as the, okay, look, I'm going to call you an expert
Fine,
as a
Joe,
clerk. But you're an expert as a clerk. Please tell me what would be wrong with you as the expert, as the clerk, hiring something in the clerk, whatever you call it. I don't care what you want to deal with. Or Brian Friel. Brian Friel has forgotten more about being a clerk than I'll ever learn, okay?
Same here, actually.
Okay,
Brian, for
so
your listening.
Brian Friel should be on that. What would be wrong with him sifting out those original applications to get the best to end up at that podium where we vote on it?
Nothing, actually. When we hired Elena,
Well,
Brian was part of that
Right,
committee.
so I'm asking, what can you come up
And-
with why this isn't
But
the
the-
best way to do it?
But my role as clerk, if I have specific questions I want someone to ask, if I know that our personnel director is on that committee, I can easily hand him a list of questions that I would like to have asked. During the fire commission interviews, I reached out to the fire commissioners and said, I'm no longer your liaison, but I'm approaching you. These are some questions I would be curious to hear the answers to.
So you're steering them in a way that you should have been on that board doing it.
No, they don't have to do anything with my questions, right?
But I'm still saying, if it was a clerk
In the
position,
end, they didn't ask the questions I asked to be asked.
if I would have asked these gentlemen here on the police interviews, I want these questions asked. Derek would have to listen to me because, no offense, Derek, but Derek answers to I'm 1/7 he answers to. But being there is not the same as giving him the questions, because the follow-ups are so important, Uta. When you put somebody in and you get them down, not to say in a bad way by putting them in the corner, but when I have you in a corner and I'm asking questions and I want you to tell me the truth on things, my follow-up questions are as important, if not more important. And that's what some of them don't have the knowledge to do. That's all. And I don't have the knowledge to do it in a clerk's position, nor do I have it in a township manager's position or a DPS director. I don't have that knowledge.
But then you're also saying that I then, by example, would not be allowed to be on the interview committee for a police chief or a fire chief or
Well,
a
you would for
DPS.
you were on the fire commission, so you know about it. Would you be the best for the police chief? How could you be?
Well, no, what I'm
I
saying
mean,
though is
you have to
if-
tell me what you have that would make you the best.
Yeah, I'll let other people.
Because we have other people
Good,
here.
Joe,
David.
I
good
wanna address
debate,
a couple of
good
things
debate.
That Joe said.
Yeah.
One is, you mentioned MTA.
Thank you.
MTA is very clear that they do not give legal advice. It is all over their material.
They don't give written legal advice.
Well, they don't give written legal advice.
right.
Also, I believe that free legal advice is worth about as much as a pair of my glasses. And somebody else's attorney's opinion, it has no bearing on the board's attorney's opinion, which is the rule that we follow.
And we followed those before, Dave. You're right. See how that got us? Yes.
Well, it's a new day, Joe.
Yeah, okay.
I mean,
all right.
You know, and if I remember correctly, you were one of Rosati Schultz's
Well, that's
biggest
fine.
supporters.
Yes.
But be that as it may, we have a written opinion. I don't see any reason to do anything other than follow her written opinion. It's she, in her capacity as the township attorney, has provided a legal opinion for which she has been compensated, and her firm will stand behind that written opinion. I mean, I don't see any reason to bring into the picture any other legal opinion, written or otherwise, when we have the opinion from our attorney.
May I clarify something with just that before you go on to your next point?
Yeah.
It isn't about that opinion so much. It's about what's the best practice, because
Well,
that
but-
opinion is
well,
only
well, there's
if
two
it should
different-
be in a public or private setting. That's
There-
all.
but
It's
there's-
not about anything else.
But there are two different issues, Joe. One is the validity of the practice that's currently in the policies and procedures. The second issue may be that we want to talk about a revision to the policies and procedures.
That's what I just said. That's my point.
But those are two separate.
That's exactly what I said. They're two separate issues.
Two separate
And that was my
issues.
proposal. Maybe,
And we're here tonight just to talk about the way things are currently being done, which is perfectly okay, and which follows our policies and procedures, and is in compliance with our attorney's opinion. I think if we want to separate and review the policies and procedures, you know, that's a chore for another day.
but that's why we're here tonight. It's not a chore for another day. I mean, I just don't agree with you. It's what I'm talking about. My proposals, put it back in the hands of the commission. That's about the policy. That's not about the attorney's opinion. I'm just saying tonight, that's why I brought my proposal up. That is the reason.
Before, I assume Kyle and Carl want to say something. Before you do, though, I just want to clarify that we're talking about hiring people, which is administrative, which is the township managers in his area. It's not in the commission's area. The commission doesn't, is not a employment expert. They don't know about the running of the department. They know about the problems of the department, and they help that department head out with them. They are not there to run the department. There is no commission here that is supposed to be running a department. They are supposed to be helping the department head with his problems or her problems. So with our procedure, the way it is now, it's very flexible. Derek can put anybody he wants to on that interview, if you will, and for lack of a better term, interview committee. All any commission does is recommend. There's not one commission that hires an employee. They recommend, and that's it. It's up to the board to decide whether that person gets hired or not. One of the reasons, certainly the major reason of keeping the board out of it, is to keep the politics out of it. And we've had a couple of hires here that the people have tried to make the process political. And adding, putting a board member into that group just fuels the fire for politics. And it's not, I'm not saying it would necessarily happen every time, but how do you differentiate? If you have somebody in there and it becomes political, it's too late to pull them out. Keep them out to begin with. We have plenty of good people that can bring candidates forward to us, as they did with to the police commission, as they did to the fire commission. The fire commission was kind of a group of people were brought to the commission through the interview committee. A third party was put in through the commission and just went around the committee. So, I mean, there's plenty of flexibility with what we already have. So I just wanted to clear that up. No, I want someone else. Kyle? Kyle? No, Kyle, you go ahead.
Well, first, I just want to back up a little bit and say I'm glad that we're having this study session. I don't think. I mean, I know the legal opinion's an issue, but for me, I think as soon as we shouldn't be focusing this study session on that. I don't personally believe when we start talking about what's legal and what's not legal. I think we're already kind of at the edge of where we want to go with this.
Yeah,
I think
and that is a separate issue that not really part of this.
Exactly. Like for me, it's like, what would we want of an ideal hiring process? That's what I think the study session should be about. I voted for the policies and procedures document. I did not notice the either change or codification of a new hiring process in it. So I'm glad that we're having this opportunity now to discuss some of it. I was just opening it up and reading it right now. I mean, I did mention in a previous meeting, for me, an ideal hiring process does get as much input as possible from different stakeholders early on for many different reasons. First, it's better for us. We're able to identify what can get through quicker, and it's more efficient. It's also better for the people that are applying, honestly. Like, they don't want to go through a whole process and then come to the end and realize that the board's not going to support them, or that the fire association is going to be unhappy with them. Like, that's not a good experience for candidates either. And that's in conflict with what we want. We want the best people to apply to be here. We want them to have a good experience too. And we want to be competitive in what we do. So again, for me, having those stakeholders involved early on where possible is ideal. And within our current policies and procedures document, there is room for that. It does say, a review committee made up of appropriate officials. It's a little bit less than what you're saying, Joe. You're saying that a whole commission should be involved right from the beginning, but ideally a review committee could include someone from a commission. I think a board member should be on there.
That certainly is available.
Yeah, and so for me, I would want to specify that in the policies and procedures. Where appropriate, include commission members, include township board. Not saying that it has to be, but just saying where appropriate. And there are specific positions where this gets harder. I know the police and fire are first in mind here. There was specific processes that were followed before that we didn't this time. I understand opinions on both sides of that. I think, if we're going to change a process, we got to do it in a better way, personally, because I think it's backfiring on us, and we got to be more transparent about why we're doing it, give people input into why we're doing something like that. So anyway, that's where I'm at right now. I'm hearing you, Joe, on like a full commission reviewing all the applications. I
say full commission.
Oh, sorry. Explain.
I just want to make that clear.
Sure.
The commission and who's ever picked or whatever, but the commission should start with Derek, and if we have an expert within the township or want one there.
Okay,
That's
so like,
what I said.
So like one or two members from the commission?
Yeah, if you had a couple of
Perfect.
commission members that you felt
Yeah.
were have done this, have hired people, that's them. But I think the commission, since it's the backbone, should start. But go ahead. I'm sorry to.
No,
I just
that's
wanna
good,
clarify.
because I mean, we all know this, but commissions have to abide by Open Meetings Act too. So as soon as you get a majority of them in a room, then it becomes a public meeting. And an issue, I mean, I hope it's okay, Derek, to say, I did speak with Derek about this before, and I mean, I would have thought about it if I was in position, but wasn't necessarily thinking about it here, is like, you don't necessarily want to let people know you're applying for jobs all the time, you know what I mean? So if people know that you're applying here and it's going to be public, you could lose your job wherever you're at, you know? So we got to be careful with that too. I'm not saying not to make it public, but I'm just saying we've got to make allowances for all these different things personally. So anyway, that's where I'm at on this right now. And I'm glad we're discussing this. That would be my recommendation for the policies and procedures document. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to clarify, because I'm making notes here, where appropriate, have a commissioner, possibly a board member. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
And of course, this is all, and we all know this, but just to say, this is all non-union. With our union contracts, we have specific contract ways to hire, et
Right.
cetera.
Could we
Yeah.
add subject matter expert or subject?
Well, I think.
We don't want to go, we don't,
Related?
we're
Okay,
we're
don't
not,
wanna go
we're,
too far.
No, I
we don't
think-
want to go too
right.
far tonight, because we're not doing anything.
And I think we
Right,
need
right.
to put some faith and give Derek some credit in that if we need an expert, the fire interview panel, for example, had a fire commission member on that panel. We had a fire chief from an off-island, another fire department, who was able to look at things with no connection with Grozeal per se, but a serving fire chief. And Derek obviously as who that person would end up reporting to. So I think, forget the outcome of that. It's not the outcome, but we had, two people from Township management in there, a member of the fire commission, and an off-island serving fire chief who was able to, provide, I say, technical fire advice or review what a certain credential means or measure the person's experience level. So, but I also believe, like others, it should not be a member of the board. It just doesn't feel right that a member of the final approval body should be on the selection body, if you will.
Carl?
I don't think that the issue is the legality. I happen to agree with Kyle quite strongly in this. The issue is not the legality of what we've been doing and what we haven't been doing. I'm looking at going forward with what is the best possible group to make these decisions. I look at what we have done in the police department. We did for 32 years that I was there. And that was, we had the commission look at it when it was somebody that was involved in a new hire position, such as a dispatcher or a police officer. At one point, I think we had somewhere around 50 applications, Joe, for one position. And we took a third of those and passed those off because they either hadn't signed, they hadn't completed, or they had somehow failed to properly submit an application, or they had a criminal history that would have disqualified them, or a driving history. And I think about a third of them, just looking at that one statistic, were removed because of clear problems that were presented in the beginning of the application process. I then remember that we had two teams that were assigned the balance, approximately 32 people, and they did some minimal background check, and they looked at some of the references and things like that. And we asked each of those teams to come in, and I'm going to suggest that the number was somewhere around 16, to come in with your three best. Who would you recommend? And I remember specifically talking to one officer and saying, this is very serious work from where I come from, because this is a 30-year commitment. This is a marriage. We're not looking to hire somebody for 5 years or 10 years. We're looking for somebody that's going to be able to effectively police and assist the Grosse-Ile Police Department and the citizens. So we took those, and then we had 6 of those that went to the commission. And at one point, I remember speaking with a veteran of the Ford Motor Labor Department for a number of years and suggested to Jim Jarecki, why don't we consider adding a person from the union to come in and do this? Because they have some skin in the game. They're going to be working with the person. And I remember Jim and I had a spirited discussion on it, and we've been bringing in some people from the union. One person to sit on that. They didn't have a vote, but they would come in and give us the benefit of their expertise. I remember that we also used a couple of different scenarios, one being a bank robbery on Macomb Street. You're first on the scene. What do? Do you go in? Do you wait? What's the best possible thing there? And we had the best possible result, and we had expertise on the panel that allowed us to have some insight into what the candidate was thinking. We also had that picture of the toll bridge when it was in the water in 1965 or 66. Joe, I'm sure you remember. We used that a number of times. You ask the candidate, you come onto the scene, what's the first thing you do? What are the first phone calls that you make? How do you begin to process this? And we had some very concrete scenarios that I think that were very, very good and helpful. When we look at non-management hires, I think some of those things are very relevant because you get to think about what the person is doing, and the officers that are doing the investigation, the background, come in and tell you whether this person has an ability to be a good officer. So I look at that and I would consider for non-manager positions that perhaps we look at having the deputy clerk involved, the liaison, the township manager, as well as the chair of that commission, and a union member to come in and say, look, here's what I think. Not necessarily have everybody voting on that. I'd be a little hesitant to have a union member vote on something like that because theirs is an advisory capacity. But to give us your reasons why and why not. When it comes to a department manager or even a deputy manager, I think it is absolutely critical and incumbent that we have people that come in. Number one, the township manager, again, I think we can all agree that Derek has a vital role in that. I think the deputy clerk, because the deputy clerk is involved with so much of the administration and processing. I would look at also a chair of that commission. And then I'd want to have an outside third party, contemporary, like we did with Dan Mercure, who can sit down and say, this is something that makes sense. I sat on a panel where we interviewed police chief candidates. I sat next to Tom Bonner and said, Tom, what do you think? He says, I think we've got the best person in the room that is already here. And that was Chief Barron. When we did your interview, something similar. Best person in here, we relied on outside third parties that had an ability to come in and say that this makes sense. This person has a definite ability from what we're seeing in the interview and the paperwork to do the job. And then I would also look at maybe a recommendation by those 4 people as to who we would bring in from the outside as an expert. Again, Dan Mercure or somebody like that. I want to move away from the commission having the politics because I think in some departments they are just way too close to the men and women that might be working there, or men working there, or women working there, or men and women working there. Get them away from the politics. What Grosse-Ile needs and what Grosse-Ile should have and what we should do is to respect the best interests of the community. Sometimes it's not who you know. It's tough to look somebody straight in the eye and say, I like you, but I can't vote for you because I don't think you're the right person for the job. That's what concerns me about the politics of just having this go before a commission. If you have a commission composed of 5 or 7 people, I think that the natural tendency is to want to go along and keep somebody on the inside that makes sense. I'm going to flip back to the fire department hiring for a moment there, the fire chief. I looked at the 28 applications that we had. We had some good applications there. It was winnowed down to 6 by some very hard work. Whether or not that violated Open Meetings Act, I personally don't think that it did. But we then went down to 2. And then we had an applicant come in late in the game and said, I want to be considered too. And we interviewed those 3 people. I do not believe that it is the function of a commission to go ahead and put a rubber stamp on somebody internally because they're comfortable with them. I think what you need is a much larger body that can look at things objectively. I respect the idea that we need to have some information from within, but I don't know that a person that has been on a commission for a week, a month, a year, 2 years, or 5 years knows anything about the department. I spent a lot of time, Joe, you and I rode together, and I spent time riding with other officers. I spent time trying to understand what was going on in the department. I think that the product that the community deserves is the best input from a group that does not have politics that are involved with a selection or a group that is truly knowledgeable. I don't think that anybody had more knowledge about the fire chief position than Dan Mercure. I mean, not only having been a chief, but having done all of the work with a voluntary department. I think that Dan provided an invaluable service. Tom Bonner provided an invaluable service there. And on that panel, we had the chairman of the police department at the time, Gil Roth. I was there, Tom Bonner was there, George Honer was there, and I don't remember who the 5th person was. But to have it just limited to the commission, I don't think does true justice to getting that wide-ranging, broad depth of analysis that we should have. I think there is a point for the chair or for a manager to come in and say, hey, here's a picture of what happened at the toll bridge. Tell me what you're going to do and why. Or this is the scenario. I don't think you're going to get the same thing from people that may have been on the commission for a short period of time or don't know anything about the job, whether it is police, fire, DPS, rec, or anything else. When I sat in on Kim O'Farrell's interview 6 years ago, I looked at it and determined that this is somebody who has the potential because of her planning. Was I the best person for that? Probably not, because I know where the rec department is. I've played on the Water's Edge golf course. I can see the pool. That doesn't make me qualified, though, to sit in on a judgment on that. It's not just what you hear during the interview, but it's applying the thought process. I like what you're saying about having people with expertise on there. I think that's important, but I don't think just sitting on a commission for an extended period of time necessarily qualifies you to do that. My first month on the DPS commission, DPW then, I saw a main break at Manchester and East River. I had just come from court. Nice shiny shoes on, suit. Saw Les Schmidtke, and he says, who are you? And I said, I'm your new liaison. He says, well, you're going to get dirty going ahead and standing around watching what we do. I said, it's part of my job. I got a tour of a main break as to what that requires. That was messy, but that's part of what your job is. I got a tour of the sewage treatment plant. That was a different kind of messy. And then I had a tour of the pump house at the north end of the island by Bridge Road and got to understand what that was about. I'm not exceptional. I don't know that that made me an expert, but I certainly understood what they did, and I understood the value of the scenarios that were then put out and the various things we had to do. So I think that there is some importance to what you're saying about that, but I don't believe that the commission is necessarily the be-all, end-all on that, Joe, and I think we should do more for the community than just simply reach out to the commission and have 5 or 7 people make a decision without knowing what their qualifications are. I think Derek, with his background, absolutely excellent. Airport here, was over at Gibraltar, has come back here. God, I would really place a lot of emphasis on that. And when Derek says, hey, I got a third party here that makes sense, Dan Mercure, maybe he goes with Jim Jones or Jane Smith next time. He's going to have a reason for doing that, and it's not going to be politics. That's the kind of stuff that matters to me. And I'd like to see where we can put something like that together.
Well, I don't know that it isn't there right now. It's just not And I think with what you're saying is you need the flexibility. There can be a situation where a board member maybe should be on that. There could be a situation where a commission member should be, but there could also be a situation where they shouldn't be. If you start putting it's this, and you certainly don't want a large group. About what they've been doing for is about right. You start getting 7, 8 people, you're not going to get anything done, especially if you have 28 applications. So that flexibility is there. I kind of liked what Kyle was saying about where appropriate, and
say the same thing.
But not tying you into one format for everything.
Yep.
And if you start writing different formats, depending on this, depending on that, I guarantee you're going to come across a format that you don't have,
Yeah.
and now you can't do anything. So I think good discussion, and I think we should go back, think about this, pool some ideas. I have an idea to send out to the board, and look at it, and see if we want to amend it.
I just have, and it may or may not be appropriate, but I'm curious if, as manager, Derek, has anything you'd like to tell us or share with us?
I think there's been a lot of good points that have been made this evening. I can see where a board member could provide some good insight as part of the group. Plus, that I've seen before where a board member provides some confidence among the other board members that some truth, not necessarily some truth, but some confidence that this is the best candidate that's being brought forward. I've been through that whole process with the group. You can trust that, this person is the best because as a fellow board member, I'm telling you that this was all done, well, and I've seen all the candidates and this person is best. So I do see some value in that. I do understand the risk of the politics that comes with that. But I could see some benefit to having a board member. As far as the entire commission, the concern, like Kyle had mentioned, if you have the entire commission, now all of a sudden all those applications are available for, when it is reviewed by the public body at a public meeting, then all that information is now available to the public and available to the other individuals or the applicant's employers. Now, you can request confidentiality as an applicant. That is possible, but a lot of, I know, applicants in the public sector don't like doing that because they might think that puts them at a disadvantage, that the prospective employer looks at them differently. So that is a concern sometimes.
They're just not for the interview.
Not for the interview, but even then, I mean, if we're reviewing, I'm talking about, let's just say the Recreation Commission as a whole went through the 26 applications that we received for rec manager, and that's all done at a public meeting. All that information is now available to the public at a public meeting. So that would be a concern. Also, the efficiencies of that. I mean, we have commissions and committees that have a difficult time making their monthly meetings. To go through a 26 applicant pool would be very lengthy. And I'll be honest with you, in this employment climate right now, the workforce, there's a lot of competition for good applicants. I would be concerned about being able to fill positions within a timely manner. So we have to be concerned not only about the efficiency, but also the effectiveness. There has to be a good balance between those two. So there has been a lot of good conversation, a lot of good points. I think that you guys are all heading down the right road and considering all the points with regards to the design of this group. But just keep in mind that we need to make sure it remains efficient and effective in filling these positions because they're not easy right now, especially. So,
Carl?
One final point as you were mentioning it and thinking about Joe was talking about tonight. I am also recognizing that when people apply for a position on Groseal and they have an internal applicant, as an example, and they know it's going to go before the commission, the perception is a home field advantage. And I think that would have the practical effect of chilling the applications that we would get. And that's one thing that I'm concerned about, because if you have, and I'm going to pick try and pick a committee or commission that we don't have, Waterways Commission. And we have a commission of 5 people there as an example. And the job pays $100,000 because we're really interested in doing something with environment and that. And it's going to be reviewed by a commission consisting solely of those people on Grosse Ile. And I'm looking at it, Joe may be looking at it, somebody else on the outside looks at it and says, well, why do I even bother? Because this is a commission that's composed of people that are there, and they're going to be a home field advantage or a home court advantage for those applicants. And I think the natural inclination, human nature is, why am I even going to bother? Something that we had talked about with applications recently. And I think that's a chilling effect that doesn't necessarily get us there. I think, like the Kim O'Farrell hire as an example, she came from Ohio. And she interviewed, and there were 2 people on the board that were there, myself and Jim Nelson. And she was able to come in, but we had people from across the state because there were others that felt that this is going to be a real, honest, thorough interview process. And I don't want to lose that. I don't want people coming from the outside and say, I would have applied, but what's the use? That's my concern.
Can I just clarify something? Since
Sure.
I asked for this session, I guess I should have stipulated, though, I understand that we have some commissions, and maybe it's not the same as before, but there was like 10 on some or 8 on some, and I get it.
Still are.
Okay, I
We
get,
have a
yeah, that's what
couple
I'm saying.
that are
I get,
like that.
I get that. So, but I'm just saying that if there's some from those commissions, because I have to say, I'm just kind of disappointed in a couple things I heard, that we have some very intelligent men and women on our commissions. There's absolutely qualified people that can hire people. There are some very smart people, and there are some very good people, and they've been in management positions with hiring people. And I'm sorry, Jim, but it kind of sounded like, there's the politics involved, and another individual said, yeah, if the commissions, it gets to be political. Well, what if somebody said, I don't trust the township board? I don't trust some of them on the township board. They're political, and they're underhanded, and they backstab, and I mean, we could go on forever. So we have to come up with a group that is the best for
Well,
Grosse Ile.
And I agree with you, and that's why I like the flexibility. You take, as the position comes up, the current wording gives the township manager the ability to put together the best.
Okay, then in this, before we go, he has the ability in the policy. What if there's board members that say, I really think I could have value on that
If
board,
well,
or that hiring committee? I think I think Kyle would add a lot of value to hire such and such to be on that committee. I would like to see Kyle. He has the final say over a board member? How can that be?
because we're not
it's a
voting
hire.
on, we're not voting on we're not voting on putting the group together. That's his job to
I
put it
understand
together.
that, to put the, but if the township board feels, I'm just saying.
But when you say township board, that means the 7 of us sit down and vote on it.
Or we talk about it, and we think that somebody on this board, let's say we have a legal issue or a legal person coming in, Carl should be on that board. Carl shouldn't wait to hire somebody, let's just say.
But as Jim pointed
No,
out,
and
we
if
can
I
do.
may,
yeah.
I'm going to disagree with that. It depends on what part of the law it is.
Yeah.
If it's not part of the law that he deals with, he's not an expert in it.
Well, okay.
That's
It's the
that
character, it's
flexibility.
what an attorney-
That's-
okay.
See, I'm just saying.
Yeah, I don't
we
see it that way.
have flexibility here where we can do it your way, or we don't. But we don't have
But he has
to.
the final say of who goes on that committee.
Yes.
Period. So if I ask him, I think that I would bring value, or Dave
But-
would bring value to that. Then how do we get Dave, Joe, or
I have
Kyle
an
on?
answer for, well,
Go ahead. You
Jim-
give the. I think you're going to give the answer. Go
I'm
ahead.
gonna, well, you give the answer.
No, go ahead.
Well, basically saying if we are a board and we meet like this and we say, you know what? I think Kyle should be on that board or on that committee. We as a board can say, Well, first of all,
Yeah.
Kyle, do you want to?
Yeah.
Do you have the
Look,
bandwidth?
Kyle
you
is
know?
going under the board right now. He goes, I don't want to be on that.
You know, but, so we as
Yeah.
a board can then decide.
That was my question.
Yes.
If he has the final say,
But he-
how can we put
He
someone on that
has the
committee?
final say unless the board votes
Then
on
we would
it.
have to actually vote
We
on
always
it.
have the final say as a board.
So we have to have a vote on it.
Yeah.
To put somebody on that committee.
I think if it was that clear cut and the majority of us just talking agreed on that, I can't imagine Derek saying, no, you're not
Well, and
doing
the
it.
second-
But if he did, we could actually bring it to a vote.
And that would be the second scenario too, is that Derek, facing a situation, says, I think one of these board people could help in this process. And he could then approach the board and say, I think so-and-so among you, would be a very good addition to this. And then we as a board can agree or disagree. But, yeah, I think where there's a will, there's a way.
There's a way to do it.
That's why I'm here tonight.
Yeah, well, and Joe, I appreciate that. I really do, because I think having this kind of a conversation, discussion, even if we disagree, is good, one, for the public to hear, but it's also good for each other. I heard some things tonight that really made an impact, that changed my thinking on some things. And like, for instance, Kyle saying, the whole confidentiality situation. Yeah, right? If you're applying for jobs, some employers even run their ads confidentially because they don't want their employees to know they're looking for somebody. And I've interviewed candidates who are currently working in certain medical, facilities. They don't want their employer to know they're looking. And likewise, I've had employees use it against me, and go back to their employer and say, well, so-and-so offered me this much, can you counter it? So, I mean, employment is sticky, right?
Oh, it is.
That's a good way to get
It's a sticky
short-term
thing.
raise.
What I did like what Carl said, though, because it's been years since we've had a tour of the wastewater treatment plant. Not that I'm really keen on it,
It's always open and available to you.
but, I
Have
think...
one whenever you want.
I remember when I was first elected, a long time ago, but I got a tour of the airport area. Our terms are coming toward a close. We've got a little more than a year to go. But I would think Derek, as manager, with some longevity here, your next board members, your trustees, even our commissioners, really, we should do more to get them acquainted with the facilities, with what we are entrusted with, right? And not just our little area, but the big picture.
Do you want to try to resolve this before we move forward with that position, or do we move forward with that position with the current policy in place? I need some direction so I know where I'm going with this vacancy.
My thought would be because of the position that it is, that the policy in place would work.
Is that the consensus?
I mean,
Have you picked your group yet?
Not yet. Nope, it hasn't been finalized.
Maybe we can just talk about that.
Oh, sorry, I'll let you go first, Sutha, since I know your
No,
area
well,
is
you've
rec.
been there too. I would just think, have at least one, if not the chair, at least a member of the commission or of the staff that is familiar with the bigger picture of the operation. I'm not saying as liaison that I should be involved at this early stage. I know I'll have an opportunity as we move forward. I have faith in you and your management team. I know that the recreation team know what the requirements are, and I know we've talked about this. See if there is a local retired or outside rec director who could conceivably shed some light on it. Maybe even Kim, I don't know, if she'd be willing, but,
I don't think.
well,
you wanna go
thinking
back.
outside the box,
Yeah,
but,
well,
well, I live way outside that
Well,
box,
yeah, you
so,
do.
I do.
I'm glad you brought it up there, because that's what I was thinking too. I was like, that's the big hire coming up.
Yeah.
It feels different to me than police and fire, because there aren't those same processes that were in place before.
And it's
Oh,
a
sorry.
little less, insult to recreation or whatnot, but as far as from a technical standpoint, like police and fire have a lot of federal, state regulations. Obviously, Joe, as you know, that it's very technical in nature as far as regulatory stuff, where rec is a little bit, I think there's more familiarity with maybe some of the aspects of the position within existing staff within the township as compared to police and fire, where that's far more technical and specialized. So,
What I was going to say, and I don't know, this is probably going to make the consensus worse for you, Derek, but I mean, I think more than one commission member isn't bad. Like 1, 2, even 3. Depending on what you feel like you need. I just want to say that. But if you have one, that's good on rec. I would like a board person to be involved. I don't want to volunteer you, Ute, so because
Told, right? Everybody moves back.
Doesn't
and
want to,
I don't want to just
did.
say that, because what I was going to say to you is if you don't feel like you have the time, I'm willing to step in on that one if you.
No,
okay.
again, I didn't want to impose myself, but I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, so I mean, I think having that, because like I said, having that person, the board in there early on, Uta's going to know very early on whether that can get through the board. Then we can weed out people well. And I actually liked Carl's suggestion of a union person. I don't know exactly how you made it. I'm not saying the union person should be a vote, but just having like a person there at that level that would know what it's like to work under it. I think that's a useful voice to have. So again, I know that's probably an additional voice for you to have, and might complicate the things, but that's for me how I'd approach that specific process.
Can we agree?
Does that give you enough?
Can we agree?
gives me a lot, yeah.
Can we agree that the chairperson of the commission and possibly another one if you can?
Yeah.
And then if you can find, if you know there's somebody like, did you say from the outside possibly, like a rec director previous or whatever? I know, okay, I understand the point on the one, I get it, but I'm just saying, is that fair?
Yes, I think I've got enough.
Does that seem fair to you on the
Feel for
board?
things where we can, I gotta try to limit it, I don't like to get too large with the group, I like to keep it around 4 if possible. So there's probably 5 or 6 that were just mentioned, so I'll have to narrow that down some, but I think I understand the desires of the board.
I think in almost the 2 years that you've been here, Derek,
Trying to.
you got a pretty good idea as to what would likely work and what would not. I would encourage you to be very innovative if you want. I think Joe has a very good point. I trust your judgment, and